Lokta, humans, this is Azbolg the Gaming Orc, here to give you a requested video about Pve specs for Nightblades, and this is what I use. I use Wiki's Outfitter, which is my add-ons. I have another add-ons video if you want to know how I do this, so I can easily swap between particular builds. I don't do a lot of PvE now since all my gear is sort of epiced out, but if you want to know what I did to kind of get the helms, because you're going to need to kind of do some PvE to get the helms. I have Spawn of Mephala's guys, and of course the NPC is blathering away. But just sort of how I would build a Pve spec. So I have cleave here, and what it does, and it looks like they refunded my skills there because I haven't used it. But actually I pick up brawler right there. So if we go to the two-handed area there, and I go to brawler, actually brawler is the one I use because it builds me a little shield when I use my two-hander. So dual wield, just sort of back up a second here, dual wield is probably better for PvE, but if you wanted to try to build something to the PvP spec, which I've had in my videos, and you want to kind of use a two-handed sword, obviously, and you're going to do a lot of damage though. I still use Wrecking Blow. If I wanted to, I use Camo Hunter to build it up, but you're not entering out of stealth. So when you like think about PvE skills, you're like, again, you know, is that morph a PvP morph or a PvE morph? So I'm going to also pick up Executioner. Let's go to Fighters Guild, where the Camouflage Hunter is. I would actually choose the other morph for PvE, which is the Evil Hunter morph. Okay, I still use Rally as my morph. You don't need the other one. This is the PvE morph if you want to think about it, because the other one removes snares. This one heals you. This one gives me a tank, sort of a tankier build, because if I'm with a tank and I need to do some damage, some AoE damage, I use Brawler. And then to heal myself, I use Rally. So I always, again, I have Rally up, and I use Camo Hunter. So I can just tap, you know, both these abilities real quick, and now I'm totally just buffed up to fight Daedra and Undead in dungeons. And so for multiple opponents, I'm using Brawler, but most of the time I just do a lot of damage. I just use Wrecking Blow. I still probably want to use Bats, because Bats is really powerful, but if you wanted to, you could use Flawless Dawnbreaker for your PvE ability, because you're just going to do more damage, and against Daedra you're going to do a lot of damage. The ultimate isn't really a big deal because you're mostly doing Wrecking Blow with a heavy weave spam, like I talk about in my PvP videos, so it's very similar. And in fact, my bow bar, this video is pretty quick because it's really, you know, it's not that complicated. Again, I would use Evil Hunter as that morph, and then I would use actually the other morph instead of Lethal Arrow, because I don't need to reduce enemy healing and poison damage. Not a big deal. But most of the time, so if I'm like single target boss DPS, I'm choosing my two-handed. And if I'm doing distance fighting with bosses, like certain bosses you need to fight at a distance really to sort of avoid AoE on the ground, so I'm using this. I still use, so then I use the Mark too, because it does a major fracture on the opponent, which is really good. Again, I get the crit from the Camo Hunter or the Evil Hunter morph, which helps me out. And then I use Poison Injection still as sort of an execute. So I have Executioner here on my other bar to execute, but I also have another execute in a way from Poison Injection. So I use that. That's the other ones that interrupt. Now I've heard of other people like Deltia using the interrupt for PvE, which is totally fine, but against more serious boss mobs and things like that, you're not going to use it. You want to just be a DPS machine. Now Caltrops is still an amazing ability, and I still use also Flawless Dawnbreaker with this. Caltrops is a major, you know, a really powerful ability. The problem is, so I'll drop Caltrops right before I switch over to my two-hander. The problem with Caltrops is it picks up a ton of aggro, and most tanks don't use Caltrops. This is actually a really good tanking ability because it does consistent damage. I'm doing 1,000 damage ticks to mobs, you know, while they sit in a cal trap. So I get stunned by a mob or whatever, you know, I get feared or who knows. There's every mob in the zone, every mob in the area is taking 1,000 damage ticks. You know, it's really serious damage. So you could swap that ability out. I don't know what you would put in it instead, really, to be honest with you. Actually, there is maybe one ability you could use, which is the you could use Relentless Focus or Merciless Focus. I'd probably use Relentless. It adds stamina regen. And I want to use drinks, but in the harder stuff, like if I'm doing City of Ash or really difficult dungeons, I'm going to use food. And I'm going to have to take stamina potions to kind of keep my stamina up. And then if I'm with a Templar, the Templar throws his ability, and I use his Blessed Shards ability to kind of keep my stamina up. Because I will run out of stamina shooting these snipe abilities. So what's my cycle? What do I do now that I'm doing damage? So on like the single target stuff, I'm doing Wrecking Blow with the Heavy Weave. If I'm doing multiple opponents, I'm doing like a Brawler ability. Like I'm trying to think in the Fungal Grotto, there's that one really annoying like squid mob boss which has a ton of ads. And then I used Clouding Swarm. And I'd use Devouring Swarm as the morph, because that's the PvE morph if you wanted to use that. And then when the boss or whatever gets low, you spam Executioner. And you try to do light attacks with the Generate Ultimate in between all this. And then the reason why this the Heavy Weave works is because it actually restores stamina on hit when you actually hit with those heavy attacks. So you're using Wrecking Blow, and as soon as the Wrecking Blow animation goes off, you use a heavy attack. Let's go back to here. What I would do with Lethal Arrow is basically you start with a Lethal Arrow, a Poison Injection, then you do a Light Attack, and you do Lethal Arrow, Light Attack, Lethal Arrow, Light Attack, Poison Injection, something like that. Basically you get 3 Lethal Arrows, and similar in PvP, I get 3 Lethal Arrows before I hit a Poison Injection. Okay. And Caltrops is just really phenomenal. If you have to have a good tank and a good healer, because you're going to pick up a ton of aggro, but you're going to be doing a lot of damage. So this is my PvE spec. You know, I use Flawless Dawnbreaker on this. This is my PvE spec. Hope you guys enjoy it and use it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you guys on the battlefield.